Welcome back. Let's go back to one of our top stories now. A police officer investigating the murder of Vereeniging engineer Armand Swart has told the Madlanga Commission about how 2 burner phones were used to conceal data after the crime. Swart was shot 23 times when he arrived at work in April last year. For more on witness A's testimony, we are joined by criminal law expert Ian Allis and criminologist Dr Mpho Matlala. Remember, you can also send us your comments and questions on WhatsApp to 072-110-5584, or you can give us a call on 010-594-6010, or engage with us on X at Newzroom Afrika. All right, a very good evening to you both, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us today. So we heard the testimony of witness A. Dr. Matlala, perhaps we'll start with you. What did you find to be the significance of his testimony?
Good evening, Dr. and good evening to the viewers. I think what I would call it shocking, was how a police official would get involved in murder, how fellow colleagues will come and support the accused murderer police officer in court, how they would try some shoddy characters would try to drive the investigation officer off the road, how the General Shibiri would then try to even solicit a bribe on behalf of the criminals, how, and I stand to be corrected, I thought he mentioned even the provincial commissioner, how they would then rub shoulders with these criminals, and in situations where names such as Molefe comes up, we know what he is capable of doing. His story is out there. He's in the courts of law. It is actually all shocking. And I think those are the significant parts, especially that part where there are 3 envelopes, one for the prosecutor, one for the presiding magistrate, and one for the police officers. It just shows how deep the road goes.
And we'll continue to unpack some of those highlights that you've mentioned there, Dr. Matlala. I mean, Dr. Matlala, Ian says that it's shocking to see the involvement of a police official at that level. I mean, we are seeing witness A's testimony in camera. Given the sensitivity of the evidence that he is giving currently, what does this testimony sort of highlight, especially that it is in camera?
Well, the main reason, if I could just elaborate, and good evening to good evening to the viewers, is for the secrecy and the identity to be withheld, because obviously the entire crime is very sensitive in its nature. There's still a lot of ongoing investigations taking place. We've seen with Molefe where that was part of the bail proceedings that were actually raised, was the involvement in the charges of that crime as well in the recent arrest in the Supreme Court and the High Court's granting of bail, because that was also mentioned. The problem is it's no secret and it's not particularly surprising. And that is the reason why the witness's identity is basically being covered, is so that we can avoid placing that individual at further risk from any attack or any involvement from an obstruction of justice point of view, or if one could go ahead and say another witness being taken out by the various parties involved, be they underworld or be they police.
And I mean, it's quite concerning that you would even in one sentence say, be it the underworld or be it the police. Dr. Matlala, I mean, with witness A's testimony, this, of course, was set around the murder of Armand Swart, who was that engineer out in the Vaal who was killed last April. And witness A speaks about how the investigation into Armand Swart's murder set the ball in motion in them even discovering the Big Five. But I think what was also quite disturbing was how he mentioned how they were able to cover their tracks along the way, how with ballistics, as we also heard with General Mkhwanazi's testimony, how he spoke of certain findings that were there but were never revealed. It was only after the PKTT went back and started reinvestigating some of those arms that they were finding linkages. I mean, what does this say to us about just this kind of infiltration, as Ian is saying, whether it's with the police or the criminal underworld itself?
It's scary, Katlego, because if top generals, police officials can influence processes and work against justice, defeating the ends of justice, then we are pretty much close to a mafia state, because this is how mafia states are being run. You start by capturing the police, and what it generally means is that national security is really at risk. You are talking about an organization in the SAPS, an organization of 180, 190,000 law enforcers. And if that kind of state machinery is compromised, we are not safe at all as a country. And by the way, coups are concocted in such ways. And if you start having rogue police generals and then they collude with rogue army generals, then the state will most definitely collapse. And that's the scariest part.
I mean, and that's a very bleak picture that you paint there, Dr. Matlala, with rogue police generals leading to a coup, because only one knows, I mean, how countries end up that have been taken over by coups. So with that said, Ian, if we're talking about that impact of corruption within the police practice, how does corruption at high levels, I mean, we are hearing of generals such as the head of organized crime, Major General Shibiri, talking about brown envelopes that could possibly be given to investigating officers, to the prosecutor, to the magistrate, in order for there to be bail applications and approvals for certain people that have been arrested. How do these crime levels influence the frontline officers, and especially when it comes to their ability to effectively combat organized crime?
Let me put it in this way, there's a twofold effect. Number one is it completely undermines the justice system. So the person is basically guaranteed to have bought his way out of the predicament. Secondly, what's actually more worrying as well, and just from a human perspective, is now, say for example, you've got this honest police officer who is now investigating and doing their utmost to ensure that the person is brought to justice. Now they've just paid their way out of the predicament that they faced in. Number one, then what stops them from derailing the investigation and putting a hit out on that police officer through the dishonest police themselves? So you basically start deteriorating into a state of anarchy. So your justice system basically falls by the wayside. Your presiding officers are guaranteed to give the wrong people a slap on the wrist. They go to your bail proceedings become pretty much academic, and the likelihood that the matter is going to actually ever go to trial is basically nullified. That's going to have an impact on your witnesses who have come forward because their identities become known. All of everything about them becomes known, even if they are in some form of witness protection, which in this country is already basically non-existent. That places them at a further risk. And then you have the police who are actually trying to do their jobs and trying to ensure these people are brought to justice, possibly being brought into the fall and themselves becoming the victims of the next crime.
Sure, certainly very worrying in terms of how this is just playing out. We do have a caller on the line. We've got Maxwell in Pretoria. Very good evening to you, Maxwell. What's your question or comment today?
Good evening, ma'am, and good evening to your guests as well. My worry about the whole situation You've got courts that are trusted with keeping those criminal or alleged criminals in court. You've got another matter that is pending. The judgment is kept pending for Mpho Matlala in the High Court to be released also by bail, of which I think he will get the bail under the circumstances. You do have TK Molise, who is the main suspect to sway a situation in Vereeniging. It's already on bail. So you ask yourself what is happening with our justice system. It's a miscarriage of justice, if you ask me about that situation, because you've got the Madlanga Commission that is investigating this matter. You've got the court that are releasing those suspects who are involved in this situation. It's a big worry for me, if you ask me. If Matlala get released, you've got double passport, the one in Swaziland, the one in South Africa. How do you give such person a bail under the circumstances? Mkhwanazi was right when he say those people have got connection from the highest court in the land, being the High Court. We can see it happening now.
Right.
It's very disappointing, if you ask me.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts, Maxwell, out in Pretoria. We also have Cunningham in Roodepoort. Cunningham, a very good evening to you. Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am, and good evening to viewers. I think today we have had a lying cop giving testimony to the commission. And I think anybody who has got a coefficient of thinking would not believe the testimony of the witness today. Because there is no way that you can have bribery discussed by 8 people and senior cops coming in to discuss bribery with investigating officers. I just could not believe the lies that policemen were saying in the commission.
All right.
And that fellow must be charged for perjury, because I think he's one of the clowns in the police force who's got a case in the SAPS, because all what he was doing today was to mislead the public and to lie. A bribery, we know from the townships how it goes. We have lived with criminals in the townships who are not just people whom you can lie. How do you have 8 people discussing a crime, a bribery, a crime of bribery?
Okay, Cunningham.
How does he explain himself going to Ntlala's house having parties? That fellow is a liar today. That witness was lying through his case.
All right, Cunningham, out in Roodepoort, thank you for giving us your thoughts. Certainly there, a different approach, a different perspective, but let's quickly take a ad break. We'll be back with more. Also remember to send us your comments and questions on 072-110-5584. Give us a call on 010-594-6010. We'll see you after this. Welcome back. We are discussing the events that took place out of the Madlanga Commission today. We are joined by criminal law expert Ian Allis and criminologist Dr Mpho Matlala. And we're also getting a few of your responses. A few of your WhatsApps have come through. We've got Omar saying witness A is a reliable witness. He's not hesitant at all and answers honestly. And then Wako says, good evening, Katlego. I think the witness testimony is revealing many shocking things that are happening in the country, things we never thought can happen. This can definitely show how the level of crime is in the country. Those who did wrong must be held accountable, and may the law take its course. And then lastly, we've got Thompson Baloyi saying a witness A testimony of the investigator is clear about what he saw. The parties he attended arranged by syndicate groups where he met senior officials of SAPS generals is really ashamed. It is clear that turning a blind eye is wrong. What is their code of ethics? As SAPS senior ranks, too much revelation in his testimony. Okay, so those were your WhatsApps. Let's get back to our guests. I think I just want to quickly touch on, Ian, the caller from Roodepoort saying that the cop is lying. There's no way that bribery could be discussed amongst 8 people. He's misleading the commission. And Omar, who sent a WhatsApp saying, no, witness A is reliable and not hesitant in answering. What's your take on that?
Let me, unfortunately for Cunningham, his name is a little too familiar, and he does have very interesting perspectives. I've dealt with him on another show as well on late night radio. So he has got very interesting interpretation of facts. But I have to say, with regards to the credibility aspect, I cannot go ahead and fault the witness. Is realistically, the bribery aspect is a long, in-depth process to it, and unfortunately, you can't go ahead and discount the fact of the number of people being involved in it, and that's where the whole issue actually lies. The rot is deep, and everybody has to get their fair share of the money for it to go ahead and be processed through the ranks.
But is it not the brazenness that continues to alarm us as South Africans for an alleged senior official to be the one who comes out and says, well, there are brown envelopes and there's a possibility for you to get your share in this? Is it not that we are often so alarmed, Dr. Matlala, by the brazenness?
In these stations is that they don't care. It's just, once it's infiltrated, they feel untouchable. And once they have that feeling of being untouchable, nothing goes ahead will stop them. Who's going to go ahead and stop them at that position and that high level? No one can go ahead and stop people at that high level. They are the kings of their own destiny.
Dr. Matlala, Maxwell from Pretoria spoke about how he's concerned that the courts aren't able to keep these criminals behind bars. He made mention of Katiso Molefe, who again was mentioned in today's testimony with regards to the cars and the weapons that were used being linked to him. And now with Matlala applying for bail and him saying that he really does think that Matlala is certainly going to be released on bail. What does this do to not only the confidence of South Africans, but also of those policemen who work day in and out to ensure that these criminals are captured, but they're not kept behind bars?
Well, Katlaho, it does not inspire confidence at all. And, you know, it impacts negatively on the morale of those hardworking police officers. But unfortunately, bail is something that is there under the law, and it applies different sets of rules, and anybody has a constitutional right to apply for bail and to be granted bail if the law permits. I mean, I'm sure my colleague will be better positioned to actually explain what the rules of the game are in bail. But for all I know is that if one is not a flight risk, and they also consider the personal circumstances and the fact that the applicant not interfere with witnesses and so forth. And unfortunately, that is how the law is in our country. And it is really up to the prosecution together with the investigation officer to actually go out there and, you know, oppose, give a solid case and oppose. But when the system is compromised because of brown envelopes, unfortunately, sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where people who should not have been released on bail in the first place being released and being sent out there. These are seasoned criminals, and unfortunately, in the criminal underworld, if you get used to doing the wrong things for a very long time, you know, you sort of normalize that kind of anomaly. You don't see anything wrong with that, but there is a huge public outcry out there, and we just hope that the Madlanga Commission will actually unearth a lot of these problems so that we can start fixing the entire criminal justice system.
Ian, I mean, just elaborating on the issues of bail, I mean, we did see that judgment has been reserved in Matlala's application for him to get bail. And I think for many lay South Africans, when we looked at the Katiso Molefe case, a lot of us thought that he wouldn't get bail, especially that he is already out on bail for an alleged murder that was committed, and then more murders then came out of the woodwork. It was not an expectation for it to be as cut and dry for many South Africans. So looking at Matlala's case, and even Nokolo saying that he now suspects that he too might get bail.
is, let me put it in this way. It's not surprising. It is, people might be outraged, but it's not necessarily a surprise when Molefe was actually granted bail. And I do foresee that Matlala also getting bail on this appeal. And the one thing that people tend to forget is that when it comes with bail of this nature, there's a lot of subjective aspects and a lot of objective facts. It's not just simply the flight risk aspect, it's also the interests of justice and the risk to society, and that could be a very subjective aspect, especially when looked at on a theoretical aspect, because the problem that one also encounters is that a lot of these people in organized crime also cover it up with legitimate businesses. And when you've got the air of legitimacy covering up for other aspects of it, it kind of becomes very difficult setting out those exceptional circumstances. Secondly, what has tended to happen is that the prosecutors, when they do raise these issues in bail, can sometimes get away with a lot more in the magistrates' court than they do in the high court, especially with the technical preparedness and all of these type of issues. And the judges will scrutinize more than perhaps the magistrates will, the aspect of technical correctness in the argument and actual legal aspects and legal issues relating to the bail than the emotional side of it. I, as a criminal defense attorney, have encountered where bail has been refused, not necessarily because the grounds are not there, but rather there's been an emotional story told rather than a legal story told. And the thing is, when you're dealing with individuals of this nature, they've got the money to take it on appeal, and they raise these on appeal, and that's where suddenly the state come very short in their investigations, especially what has taken place leading up to the arrest. And that's where one's got to be careful, because you also have those, if you do have people involved and questionable and unethical and dishonest cops involved, they will also have an impact on the investigation and in many ways hamper it, giving better grounds for bail to actually be granted and for a matter to continue until basically it's either struck out or dealt with so badly that there's no recovery for the state from the poor investigative work.
Speaking about cops that could allegedly be involved, Dr. Matlala, we heard from Witness A speaking about a character called Ndlala who had been speaking to him. Seemingly this is someone who was in and out of their office, sort of creating a base of trust between himself and the investigating officers, and at some point invites them to a party. He doesn't attend this party, but then he hears from other officers that there were high-ranking officials that were present at that party. I mean, you touched on it a little earlier on, Dr. Matlala, the Gauteng Provincial Commissioner Tumi Mtombeni, as well as Mbangwa Gwashu, who's the Deputy Commissioner in the Sedibeng District. And of course, what seems to be a link there is that Armand was killed in Vereeniging, which is within the Sedibeng district. What do we say about the proximity of criminals to police officers, if in any way? Because at some point, even at the ad hoc committee, General Sibiya was questioned about his relationship with Brown Mogotsi and him saying, I can't go around investigating everybody. Should we already be raising alarms when there could be that relation between what seems to be criminals and high-ranking officials?
Madlanga, we can forgive a pastor for associating with sex workers. Maybe the pastor is trying to pray for them or something like that. But for a police general, for a police officer, any police officer at any level or rank, to actually associate themselves with a the criminal underworld, organized crime syndicate bosses is unforgivable. And this is the litmus test that I'm always talking about, that they have failed the test for integrity. And as such, at that level, people should be removed and be booted out of the police service, because you cannot have police generals rubbing shoulders with criminals and still expect them to have the moral authority to hold power within society. It's unacceptable. And by now I had expected that if General Fani Masemola was watching, was listening to the testimony of witness A, General Shibiri in particular should be in the police cells tonight. She should have been processed, because we cannot let that kind of those kind of loose cannons or anarchists within the ranks of the police service.
Ian, do you think with the evidence that was heard today, it does warrant for the commission to ask for Shibiri as well as Mtombeni Nkwashi to appear before it?
Oh, most definitely. The fact that their names are just being mentioned, it is now on them to go ahead and explain their involvement or or lack of involvement. The fact is that, unfortunately, and it's been shown that the names that are getting dropped in this inquiry, where there's smoke, there's fire, and the problem is that they do have to answer. And realistically, now Masemola himself has got to take a stand as to what he wants to do with these officials. And the fact is, I'd like to just make one comment on the aspect of that one statement that Sabia actually made of. He's not expected to investigate everybody. You're not expecting him to investigate everyone from the top down, from the bottom upwards. But when there's certain recurring names and there's certain people in very specific positions, yes, that actually is specifically your job as a deputy commissioner. So realistically, to take that approach and basically flaunt your authority, that says a lot about where we're going and what other gremlins are going to start coming out of this woodwork.
Gentlemen, as we wrap up, Dr. Matlala, what would you say should be the long-term, or would be the long-term implications for South Africa's criminal justice system if systemic infiltration, especially by organized crime, continues within our systems?
Well, if organized crime is left unabated, it is more likely to turn into transnational organized crime. And that involves serious crimes against the state, terrorism, and so forth. And we are most definitely headed to a failed state. The state can fail. The state will collapse. It will be run over by criminal syndicates. God forbid we don't get to that point, but it is a serious threat to national security.
And Ian, lastly, do you think our oversight bodies in the country are well equipped to deal with what we are faced with?
Let me put it to you this way. I tend to think that we are over-regulated in certain respects, and the problem is they're able to nab the little guys, and the problem is the big fish are the ones that get away, that are getting away with the problem, with the issues and the crime as it is. So yes, we've got the ability, but it's who is willing to implement that ability, and who's willing to implement the proper regulations on the bigwigs, and not just basically looking for the guppies. Unfortunately, what we've tended to become is a stats-based country when it comes with certain of our justice system and our policing, and they're more interested in busting your lowly drunken driver than actually going after your bigwig criminal underworld characters.
All right. Well, the Madlanga Commission continues, and of course that parliamentary ad hoc committee will resume tomorrow with the Police Minister Senzo Mchunu continuing his evidence in chief. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your contributions this evening. That was Dr Mpho Matlala, who is a criminologist, as well as Ian Allis, who is a criminal law expert. Welcome back. So we just wrapped up our conversation with our panel of experts around the Madlanga Commission and Witness A giving his testimony today. You also sent us a few of your WhatsApps. Let's take a look. We have Rantili Kekezo saying the testimony from Witness A is exactly why the Madlanga Commission is so essential. It's sickening to hear these claims, but the fact that they are finally coming out in a formal inquiry is the only way to start cleaning the house. This isn't just about political interference anymore. It's about the entire criminal justice system being potentially captured. I just hope this leads to real accountability and arrests, not just another report that gathers dust. All right, and Moses from Rustenburg says, evening, beloved. To be honest, General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi is the best thing that has ever happened to South Africa under the democratic government. Let's grab our popcorn and watch as it unfolds. All right, well, we'll be having a lot of that popcorn happening as tomorrow we will be seeing the Minister of Police continuing his evidence in chief at the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee.